Hello everyone, Cliff Taylor with Penrith Home Loans in the Spokane market. Wanted to just do a quick video with regards to the volatility that we're seeing in the mortgage market these days. Inflation numbers came out. Inflation still is a big concern, not only nationally but globally. And that concern reared its ugly head with a higher than expected consumer price index number that came out the end of last week. And so between Friday and into early this week, rates have definitely ticked up. So a 30-year fixed rate is pushed up into the sixes, and that's across the board with just about every style of financing out there as far as a 30-year fixed. So I highly recommend that you revisit numbers with your lender if by chance you had been pre-qualified or pre-approved more than even a week ago and are out looking at homes at what would be considered your max. So you want to make sure you can still qualify. Inventory still, even though there is a little bit more inventory on the market, it's still considered low historically. So there are more buyers out there than there are sellers. But this uptick in rate has definitely kind of reduced the energy in the market a little bit. Couple things I wanted to throw out conceptually. If you're a seller and you've been on the market for a little while and you're concerned about the fact that there's a little less energy in that marketplace and you want to attract a buyer, consider the concept of maybe putting some money on the table to buy an interest rate down for a client or for a potential buyer and attract that buyer that's now looking at rates into the sixes. Attract that buyer that would be intrigued with your listing to get a rate back into the fives. If you were to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of 2% of your sales price towards a seller's concession, towards closing costs to buy that rate down for a buyer, you'll make about a 5/8 difference in the interest rate. So from the low sixes, you're going to get down into the mid fives. If you were to make a 3% contribution towards a buy down, a permanent buy down towards the interest rate, you would take that rate from the low sixes down into the low fives, about a 1% difference. So that 2 to 3%, call it contribution towards a buyer's closing costs, would have the same impact of you making somewhere between a 7 and 10% reduction in your list price. So if you're trying to attract a buyer, think of that as an option. So if you're a seller and you're trying to work those numbers out and you're talking to your realtor, your listing agent about it and have some questions, don't hesitate to call me. If you're a buyer thinking about trying to make an offer on a house, and you're trying to be aggressive and feel like you can be aggressive, you might get bigger bang for your buck if you go into that seller and say, will you contribute 2 or 3% towards my closing costs so I can buy the rate down to something that's more attractive to me, get back into the low to mid fives versus today's rate being in the sixes. So there's a lot of different ways that you can play with numbers to make it attractive for both a buyer and seller, to kind of adapt to what rates have done and the energy that's in the market. Again, it's still a seller's market. There's still fewer homes out there than there are buyers looking, but this is one way that maybe you can bring two parties together and make a grave impact on both sides with not having to reduce the sales price that much or being able to get that buyer into something with a much lower rate than what the market is today. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call me, Cliff Taylor, Penrith Home Loans, 509-468-7558. Thanks, and have a great week.